creative God, source of all life, from whom we come and unto whom our spirits return. You have been our dwelling place in all generations. You are our refuge and our strength. Very present Spirit, help in all challenges of life. So grant us now your blessing at this moment, in this hour. Enable us to put our trust in you, that our spirits may grow calm and our hearts be comforted. Lift our eyes beyond the shadows of earth and help us to see the light of eternity, as certainly as the light is shining into this chapel in the spirit of Bruce. So we may find grace and strength for this and every time of need. Through our Lord and God. Amen. Bruce Ralph Fretz was a leader with quiet grace and tact. So was the title of an article in the magazine called The Counseling Psychologist. Here are a few other quotes within this article and a few other articles. Linda Brickhead said, Bruce was an excellent role model as a mentor and counseling psychologist. He is exemplary in his personal and professional integrity. Zionok Black said, I had a sense of his presence throughout my graduate work. I always felt his confidence and his support, his friendship and his warmth, and his interest in me as an individual. Wilford Bussey said, I remember Bruce most fondly as a passionate, dedicated teacher. Gene Carter said, I will always remember Bruce's vision and energy in leading counseling psychology into a new identity, with the ability to be alive and vibrant through the reorganization of Division 17. Susan Drumheller said, Bruce remained calm, no matter what, and positive. He would call me with stories of his travel adventures, transporting me into a world beyond counseling psychology, reminding me that there was a world beyond the counseling psychology program. Jeannie Manesse said, Bruce was caring, extremely empathetic, truly dedicated, and amazingly organized. Cindy Mendelson said, I recall fondly how supportive and non-judgmental Bruce was, regardless of what I did. That experience of feeling accepted was so critical to my growth at that time. Shelley Osana said, when I think of Bruce, what stands out most in my mind is how he was consistently kind, good-hearted, and level-headed. Bruce was a calming presence for me during graduate school. It was always very reassuring to know that he was at the helm. Aldrich Patterson said, I am a psychologist today because of Bruce. His patience, guidance, consultation, commitment, and mentoring. Bruce was helpful when I felt hopeless. Bruce showed confidence in me when I was unsure. Bruce affirmatively acted on my behalf when I felt I was being acted against. Bruce was my bridge over troubled waters. Raymond Fowler, current Chief Executive Officer of the American Psychological Association, perhaps best summarized Bruce's contribution when he said, Bruce has always been the model of the counseling psychologist. He understands practice, leads in research, and is everyone's first choice to represent his chosen specialty in every venue. David Mills of the University of Maryland added, Bruce is proof that decentness and integrity do not have to be boring. Karen O'Brien said a week ago, Dr. Bruce Fretz was an outstanding counseling psychologist whose work as a leader, scholar, and mentor has had lasting effects on our field. Bruce was a man for all seasons, a truly exceptional human being who lived life fully and made a profound difference in our field and to the people who he loved and mentored. And the University of Maryland's newsletter this past week pronounced, renowned, retired University of Maryland professor Bruce Ralph Fretz, a cherished faculty member in the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences Department of Psychology, passed away on July 17th. His colleagues, students, friends, and his peers in the academic community mourn his passing, but celebrate the life and legacy of a caring teacher whose life and work made a difference. We are here today to celebrate the life of Bruce Ralph Fretz, who was a leader with quiet grace and tact, and whose life and work has made a difference. Bruce, at an early age, became the director of the Counseling Psychology program at the University of Maryland's College Park campus, a title he had from 1969 to 1991. In 1995, he advanced to act as Associate Provost and Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs at the university. He has written many books and numerous articles within his specialized field. Throughout all of his advanced credentials and contributions, Bruce and Barbara found a mutual outlet by singing in various choirs, including the Oratorial Society of Washington, performing at the Kennedy Center. And in fact, it was in a college choir in their freshman year that they met, and have been singing in choirs together ever since. It's a great tribute to have this choir here, this community choir, this chapel choir, to sing in his behalf, in his memory, on your behalf, Barbara, and family as well this day. Bruce and Barbara accomplished a great deal in their lives together. I think many of us here in Aspen knew that Bruce was a professor, but I'm going to guess that we did not know, perhaps along with me, all of his accomplishments and reputation. I've just learned that Barbara, I didn't know this, I don't even know I've known Barbara and Bruce for such a long time, that Barbara has a PhD as well. And along with, of course, both children. I mentioned this to her and Barbara just silently. When I mentioned that, I didn't know you had a PhD. Barbara she didn't go into any length, she just kind of nodded her head. Doesn't everybody? As far as we know in Aspen, with all these accomplishments before he retired out here, it's great to learn all about this, but for us in Aspen, Bruce's most important contribution is organizing the music for choir. And they are grateful. You heard it. She just volunteered. She said, do I have to take that over? We have another choir someday after this. Ushering at the Wheeler, the music festival, and this actually says a lot about the inner and outer quality and character of this man, Bruce Fretz. He can be a provost at university, and he can also be an usher handing out programs outside the music tent. It says a lot about him. And of course, he volunteered and assisted in many community endeavors along with singing in choirs here. Perhaps for us that was enough, along with his warm and very genuine personality. Personally, I always enjoyed talking with Bruce at various receptions, or particularly while he was making copies of music at the chapel. I only wish I had talked with him more and learned more from him. But today, we take a meaningful moment to remember him as an accomplished professional and wonderful person. He was not only a professor and leader, but a world traveler along with Barbara. Most importantly, he was a great husband, father, grandfather, brother. May we literally now surround and embrace his family. Barbara, son Eric, his wife Jennifer, daughter Lori Sipes, husband Paul, grandchildren Mason, Bree, Anna Fretz, Benjamin, Anna Sipes, sisters Jacqueline Mole, Barbara, Buck, and Sandra Traster. May Bruce's spirit carry on in your lives. We will be with you and one another. This is a representation. This community here is a mere symbol of who this person was, and we are here to honor and celebrate his life. Jim.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
For us as a chapel here, we want to serve people in various ways, as Bruce has served in so many ways. But we also want to make us, just to say that it is my belief, and I think so many of us in our own way, that something of life continues. We don't know what that is, but we do have this stronger belief, faith, that something in life goes on. And I know that Bruce had that faith as well. Something else I learned, I think I knew this before actually, I think Bruce had told me this before, that at an early age, I think as he was going into college, he was thinking, he grew up in a Lutheran family and was thinking of even going into the ministry. And he kind of toyed with that idea, but as Barbara said, you had to do sermons. And he said, I think I'd rather listen to people than speak to people in a pulpit. So he became a psychologist and a teacher of psychology. But we know that his faith was strong, and that's really simply the message. Knowing what Bruce was, and part of his faith made that so. Part of our faith is that something goes on in our life and his spirit will soar. After listening to these wonderful words that we've all heard before, the 23rd Psalm, I listened to Rami, our rabbi that was just here this past weekend, who's made such an impression every time I talk with him, Rabbi Rami Shapiro. And then he was talking with another great rabbi about this text, Rabbi Salman Sakhter Shalomi. And it was a wonderful 5-minute interview on YouTube, you can pick it up, about the meaning, the deep, deep meaning of this 23rd Psalm, and how it really resonates with us, and that we can, that the Lord is our shepherd, and what that might mean for us. And to know that lying down in green pastures is fun. Have you ever done that? I hope some of you had to know what that feels, just to lie down on the ground. We don't do that too often, but to lie in the field and look up in the sky, and how this earth lifts our souls beyond this earth to something more and something greater. Even walking through the valley of the shadow, we will fear. It's not necessarily evil, but we'll have no fear because we know that there's something beyond us that's there. And we can know that now. We live in the eternal now. Rod and staff. They mentioned that rod is sometimes keeping us in line, but the staff is there to bring us home. Preparing a table before me, even in the presence of our enemies, whatever it is, the table is always there set for us and ready for us. Surely goodness and mercy. And being anointed. It's not just, in Rabbi Solomon said, it's not like oil falling over our heads, but it's really the anointing. The anointing with oil is not the oil so much, it's the anointing. And we are anointed, each in our own way. Sometimes the word Messiah really means anointing, and we each played that role, and Bruce played that role in his life. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I and Bruce shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
May we discover through pain and torment the strength to live with grace and humor. May we discover through doubt and anguish the strength to live with dignity and holiness. May we discover through suffering and fear the strength to move forward toward healing. May it come to pass that we be restored to health and vigor. May life grant us wellness of body, spirit, and mind. And if this cannot be so, may we find in this transformation and passage moments of meaning, opportunities for love, and the deep and gracious calm that comes when we allow ourselves to move on.
Jeff Bestick, a fellow chorister and great friend of not only us but of Bruce, couldn't be here today, and he asked me to read this for him. He wrote to me, "After I heard what had happened to Bruce and the decision that he had made, it occurred to me that I had a very special opportunity to say goodbye to a loved one. This was a sad but unique chance that rarely presents itself. I crafted my words and had a dear friend review it. She cried. Thus, I felt I had captured my emotion. Dear Bruce, I understand you have made the hardest decision of your life. Now I must say goodbye. I want you to know what a wonderful influence you have been on me. Your gentleness and delight for life have truly been inspirational. And of course, your gift of music and selfless willingness to venture into it because of Barbara defines love. You were very good at it too, by the way. It was an honor and a pleasure to rehearse and perform with you. So I bid you farewell until we meet again, unless my wish is granted and I come back as a labradoodle. I will carry you in my heart and hear the melodious resonance of your laughter forever. Be at peace and say hi to my folks. Love, Jeff."
Years ago, my husband and I moved next door to Barbara and Bruce. We bonded over our mutual love of travel.
They had been almost everywhere and truly knew everything. When Bruce said that the one trip he would not want to have missed was a week-long train ride along the northern coast of Spain, we knew we should follow in the Fretz's footsteps. or should I say train tracks. And we took that trip. Of course, it was an incredible Fretzian type of experience. Bruce loved to volunteer, as you all know, and each June he and Barbara volunteered at the Food and Wine event. Often they returned home exhausted, but laden with goodies, and they shared not the fatigue, but rather the other things. I remember one year they had perhaps 10 dozen limes that were divvied up, and margaritas flowed freely. Bruce volunteered in a variety of organizations where his talents and skills provided enormous benefits to others. He also volunteered where he could enjoy freebie benefits, at the film festival, at the music concerts, theater and choral groups. How then did he have time to also be my co-chair on the landscaping committee of our townhouse neighborhood and get his hands dirty planting, replanting, and replanting yet again, beautifying our entire area? Perhaps it was the love of the chase of the perfect location for each plant to grow well and thrive. Yes, that must have been it, because Bruce's entire professional and personal life was committed to finding the perfect situation where all those he knew could grow and could thrive. I could go on and on with silly stories about the evening dining habits of Barbara and Bruce. On their front deck, watching the coyotes, the fox, the ducks, and the bears meander nearby, while Bruce kept a careful eye on the safety of their dinner bottle of wine. Or the phone calls that I would get to grab my camera and document the amazing animal happenings on our lake or in the woods. Barbara, do you remember the night the beaver decided to put on the swimming show in the lake? So life continued to be great and good and full of adventure for Bruce until this past spring. We arrived back in Aspen the very evening that Bruce was rushed to the hospital. It didn't seem possible that I couldn't have my daily conversations with Bruce. As his health deteriorated, I knew that I wanted to have one last conversation with him. And so I sent the following message via email to Barbara to read to Bruce, which she did. And now she has asked me to read that message to you. How very precious is the right to choose, how to live one's life and how to end it. But how very wrenching it is for those who love the one who makes the decision. Bruce has had an extraordinary life, dedicated to helping the lives and fortunes of others. His academic career and his volunteer careers have made this world a better place. His joie de vivre, his hiking prowess, and his passion for planting and replanting and replanting, and then feeding and watering all those plants have made our little townhouse area in Aspen a delight. Barbara, please share this note with Bruce and let him know that if the doctors and he and you decide that his declining health fight should end, that we, his neighbors, will forever see him and smile at and with him as we look at the wild daisies and columbine and lilies growing in Aspen. As we see volunteers at the Music 10 concerts and at the film festival, at the Food and Wine and at the master classes, we will always remember the volunteer work of Bruce. As we listen to beautiful music and hear choral groups sing, we will remember Bruce's delight in music and singing. And when we travel, we will always think of the consummate traveler, Bruce. And now, if he should choose to take this next trip to places found only in our dreams and with our faith, it will be with the same sense of intellectual curiosity and willingness to try something unknown that Bruce has undertaken in his other adventures. Richard and I wish him a true bon voyage.
Good morning. Bruce was a long time, albeit not long enough, friend. My husband and I adored him him. We adored his wife. We didn't know his children well enough because we met just as they went off to college. But we know this. We know every aspect of what you've been talking about this morning. I'm going to shed a little bit different light on Bruce's life. He loved life, as you all know, and he lived it to the fullest. He also lived it on his terms. I always thought, from the day I first met him in their home in 1988, that he viewed it as an adventure, and indeed he did. I have two short stories, both of which are true, that illustrate how he loved to live. Several years ago, my husband Jim and I came to Aspen, I should say, to celebrate Jim's birthday. I knew that Jim had always wanted to have a hot air balloon ride. Why someone who had spent his life jumping out of airplanes thought he needed to do that, I don't know. But nonetheless, we did it. So I called Barb and Bruce and had them arrange the surprise for our visit. On the morning we took the ride, we all climbed into the basket, and shortly after liftoff, I looked over to Bruce to thank him again for making the arrangements. Much to my amazement, he looked absolutely green around the gills. "What's wrong?" I asked. He sheepishly looked at me over his glasses and said, "I'm afraid of heights." But he wasn't about to miss the adventure. Or maybe it was the champagne toast that awaited us. Who knows? But he made it wonderful. Shortly after Barb and Bruce purchased their condo, they asked me if I would help them select pieces to decorate the house. I was delighted to do so. So on one of our visits to see them, we took a few days, the four of us, to visit national parks and stop in many interesting spots and towns along the way. Bruce drove. Bruce had a very strict timeline. Bruce had an agenda for each day's travel, and our days were jam-packed with sightseeing. One afternoon, though, we hit the mother lode. We arrived in Moab, Utah, and I thought, Moab, Utah. And I thought, oh, this is wonderful. Many wonderful shops with tempting, lovely things, perfect for their home. I also, as an aside, wanted to find a turquoise pendant for myself that day. But Bruce had set the timeline, and he gave me 45 minutes to accomplish everything. Heaven only knows what people in that town thought was going on. I felt as though I were a character in a cartoon. I would pop into a jewelry store on one side of the street, and as I looked out the window, I would see Bruce frantically motioning to me to come across to the shop that he and Barb were in, to look at something they had found. So I'd race across the street, give my opinion on whatever they had selected, and run back over to another jewelry store. No sooner would I enter another store than Bruce would beckon again, and off I go like the human road runner. The amazing thing is that when those 45 minutes were up, I had my turquoise pendant, and they had a house full of goodies. That man could pack more into 45 minutes than any human, with the exception of my father, I'd ever encountered. Always on the move, filling every minute, and living life to the very fullest. What fun we had. And now our dear friend has embarked upon the greatest adventure of all. And I know that this piece that I'm about to share with you, which I shared with many of my mental health patients over the years, portrays Bruce better than anyone else that ever received the words of this work. It was written by a hospice nurse, and until we meet again, dear friend, this is how I choose to think of you. I am standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her wings to the morning breeze and starts for the blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength, and I stand and watch her until at length She hangs like a speck of white cloud just where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, "Oh, she's gone." But gone where? Gone from my sight, that's all. She is just as large in mast and hull and spar as she was when she left my side, and she is just as able to bear her load of living freight to her destined port. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just at the moment when someone at my side says, "She's gone," there are other eyes watching her coming, and other voices ready to take up the glad shout. Here it comes.
I am the crier in the family, so please bear with me. We'll try to keep it together. I was blessed to have shared some of my father's last lucid moments with him. I can tell you, he was not scared or sad to be leaving this earth. It was truly as if he knew he was going on to do more great things in a new place. Just another one of his wonderful trips. Since then, I have reflected on my dad's life and the way that he lived it. I found myself thinking about what he might want to say to all of you gathered here who have been touched by his presence in your lives. And here's what I came up with. Value the experiences of your life more than the things that you own. Seek to add new experiences to your life as often as you can. Cherish each other, even if there are differences between you. Help one another, always make time to help one another. Argue less, smile more, forgive, and use the gifts that you have been given to make this world a better place. It still breaks my heart that my daddy is gone, but I am proud that he lived a phenomenal life on this earth, and I know that he is very happy where he is right now watching all of us. This was sent from my Aunt Babs, one of my father's two older sisters. Some early memories of Bruce by his sister. Growing up in our small town of 500 people in rural Bucks County on the far outskirts of Philadelphia made its own imprint on Bruce. He grew up with his sisters in the post-Depression Great War days. Our house sat on 1 acre of land, 3/4 of which was known as the patch, where we grew and helped preserve all our vegetables, berries, and grapes. Each spring and summer, Bruce helped as we planted seeds, pulled weeds, picked ripe peas, beans, and corn, dug potatoes, ate grapes, and tossed rotten strawberries at one another. When the three of us were picking strawberries one summer afternoon, a car on the front highway slammed on its brakes, backed up, and parked. The driver got out and walked into the field. "How much for a box of those things?" he asked. We stood up and looked at each other, imagining what it might be like to pocket a bit of money for ourselves. However, we also knew our father had looked at each row of strawberries and had probably calculated how many quarts of strawberries he expected when he returned home from work. Bruce told the man they weren't for sale. I mention this because honesty and integrity were a strong foundation for Bruce's life. If you knew him well as an adult, you knew that his sensitivity, gentleness, integrity, and strong sense of values enriched his work and his family life. Getting back to our youth and growing up, the quiet and seemingly uninteresting small town in which we grew up sometimes felt plain boring. Our house and lot, being sandwiched between US Route 202 and the Reading Railroad, made us very aware of being able to travel away from our small town. The influence of the train and highway stoked Bruce's love of travel, but it was his discovery of music that led him beyond our small town. We had no music in our family life. Yet, when Bruce was 12 or 13 years old, he taught himself how to play piano at the house where he had his first babysitting job. It seemed to me that music lit up his mind and his life. As he learned to play better on the piano, he also began to play songs on the church organ. At Gettysburg College, he began singing in the choir with his future wife, Barb. During all their years together, the two of them continued in various choral groups to make a joyful noise. As many of us know, he continued to make his way through the world enjoying this love of music and travel. He will be missed by his sisters, but I think in many ways, Bruce had already been in heaven, surrounded by his love of music, his love of travel, and a family that loved him dearly.
I'm going to be doing you with a tear tea here. Thank you. It's 1971, and in a modest split-level suburban home in the Maryland suburbs of Washington, D.C., in a small bedroom decorated with wallpaper commemorating the moon landing, the little boy asks, "Read it again, Eddie." Over and over, night after night, the youngster is captivated as the father patiently begins a poem, Casabianca, about the 1798 Battle of the Nile, and the fiery hand of the doomed French ship lowering its captain and his son. The boy stood on the burning deck against all that he had fled. The flames that lit the battle's wreck shone round him o'er the dead. Yet beautiful and bright he stood, as born to rule the storm, a creature of heroic blood, proud of the childlike form. The flames rolled on, he would not go without his father's word. That father fainted death below. His voice no longer called out, "Say, Father's Day, yet my task is done." He knew not that the chieftain lay, unconscious of his son. "Speak, Father," once again he cried, "if I may yet be gone." And but the booming shots replied, and fast the flames rolled on. Upon his brow he felt their breath, and in his waving hair, and he looked from that lone post of death in still yet grave despair, and shouted but once more aloud, "My father, must I stay?" While o'er him fast through sail and shroud, the reeking fires made way. They wrapped the ship in splendor wild, caught the flag on high. They streamed above the gallant child, like banners of the sky. There came a burst, a thunder sound, and the boy, oh, where was he? Asked of the winds that far around with fragments strewed the sea. But mast and helm and pen and fair that well had borne their part. But the noblest thing that perished there was that young faithful heart. Bruce Ralph Fretz was a great man, and I'm not saying he was a good man in that kind of a way, like the way it is said in the given wake of any given departed, the way we talk about the weather. No, every person who's listening to me now, you know what I mean. You know Bruce Fretz, and if you knew him at all, then you knew he was a great man. A man of long odds, a husband and father, a scholar, a leader, a world traveler. If I can be half the man and father he was, I will face my end as bravely and as contentedly as he faced his. He was a man of long odds. My father's father died when he was a young teen, and this stacked some pretty big odds against him. He was forced into the adult world, the working world, as a young teen, and it was a rough start. He was lucky to find some unexpected and gifted mentors at the pool and at school. He found a rewarding and well-paying job as a lifeguard and a swim teacher at a local park. Despite being tracked for a vocational future, a counselor allowed him to start taking advanced placement classes, and this ignited a scholarly impulse and ended up that he was co-valedictorian of his class. He obtained a rare scholarship to Gettysburg, where he met his wife and lifelong travel partner, Barbara, my mother. He scored a chance for doctoral work at Ohio State University, despite missing the deadline because luckily someone cut him a break. He arrived at his new Ohio State University PhD at Maryland just as the boom of post-war psychology crested and programs for counseling psychology were growing. He was the right man in the right place at the right time. He attained tenure remarkably quickly and then became director of the counseling psychology graduate program, all of this only a few years out of grad school. He led and built that program to national recognition over 20 years while simultaneously engaging in decades of leadership roles. In APA as Division 17 President, as a member of the National Register Board of Directors, as the editor of the Counseling Psychologist Journal, and at the University of Maryland's Provost's Office, to cite but a few of the largest roles. During these same years, he repeatedly defied other odds, walking away from being rear-ended by a runaway truck, from a nearly lethal brain tumor, which he delayed surgery on to take a family trip to the South Pacific, from being thrown through the air, airborne by vehicles running into him on 2 different times. He delayed his first open heart surgery over a year until I completed my tour in Iraq, and from rolling an SUV full of glass and mirrors 5 times off a Kansas highway at 70 miles per hour. As I told him, clearly, Dad, your lifetime of church-going is paying off. He was a father. I never knew I was odd, or that my relationship with my father was odd, until I was a teenager. I learned that all other teenagers did not routinely hug their dad, or say I love you, or put their arm around him while watching the football on the couch. When we moved to the Tony suburb of Potomac, I never felt the need to evaluate love by counting Christmas or birthday presents, although I did tire of the question from my friends, what else did you get? After I listed my 2 presents, each valued at $25 less. Where some of my friends struggled with their fathers emotionally or youth physically, Bruce was always my best friend. He excelled in having clear standards, tied to real-world consequences, and enforcing them. So, while it sucked sometimes to have to pay for insurance and gas for the car as a teenager, the one time my friend's parents just arbitrarily refused him access to their car, I was able to save the day, because Bruce, with clenched jaw, allowed me to save the day and drive down to the concert with our car because I had paid for the right to use that car. That always struck in my memory. Bruce's way was better. Bruce strove endlessly to provide options to his children that he felt he had missed out on, taking great risks to moving to get us top-notch schools. And we had enrichment with piano, violin, football, Boy Scouts, T-ball, gymnastics, taking the SAT as 6th graders, ballet, touring, internships. I know he had Ivy League dreams for his kids. And at least my brilliant MIT engineer sister Lori fulfilled that role. In the summer of my 10th grade year, Bruce hatched a plan to accelerate my math placement to the honors level to match my other classes, the better to apply to Princeton, of course. This involved months of summer school, weeks of additional tutoring to cover the trig not offered in the summer class, and this was in addition to the summer research internship at the USDA. You know, the usual teen summer. Thus, I missed most of the summer, one where one friend was leaving and another friend was returning. My frustration with all the academics and lack of fun got the best of me, and the next fall semester I brought home a report card. All B's and a D. Bruce was stern and stoically practical as always. I recall his opening comment to me, well, Eric, you have my attention. And we got through it. You know, Princeton passed and my battered GPA that led to Michigan and the Navy and amazing things. It was only in having my own son that I came to a full understanding of what I took from him that term, and I regret it. I think my decade-long pursuit of my PhD was in part to atone for that long ago disappointment. Because you never want to let your best friend down. 3 of Bruce's 5 wonderful grandchildren are mine. I'm not ashamed to say I'm proud of all 3. I have more than once had childless friends tell me, if I could be sure my kids would be like your kids, then I'd have kids. But my parenting rule book is only 4 words. What would Bruce do? He was a scholar. Bruce was a prolific researcher and author of dozens of major articles, some cited for decades. He co-authored a foundational textbook in his field. It was in the late 90s I was at my first APA convention in Boston or DC, or one of those East Coast cities, and I was in a long line for student registration behind some Salukis. Southern Illinois has a big counseling psych program, and since I had a degree from SIU, I introduced myself as an alumni. And the students noticed my name tag and said, oh, Eric Fretz, do you know Bruce Fretz? To which I replied, yes, he's my father. At which point this group of 20 students took a step back. Bruce Fretz of Fretz and Gelso. I cite your father's work all through my dissertation, especially his 1982 study of blah, 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 blah. And in those few moments, I got an idea of what it must be like to be the son of a rock star. He has mentored hundreds, students and colleagues and friends alike, and they all say the same thing. Nicest guy, so caring, always had time for me, sternly professional,
changed my life. Amazing teammate. And of course, I still have that spider plant that he gave me. For a small town, fatherless, ambivalent 9th grade student on a vocational track, who for all appearances was destined to go nowhere, Bruce stands as a testament to the scholarly potential within us all. He was a leader. Bruce's leadership was best described as quiet but capable. He had been mentored as a child by a caring member of a pool staff, and he never forgot what it meant for a child or anyone to be told that they could achieve something special. Bruce had a wonderful ability to build consensus and never make himself part of the problem. He was nearly unflappable, perpetually rational in how he engaged any situation. If he had an ego, I never saw it, perhaps only in his pride for his children and grandchildren. His greatest pleasure, other than grandchildren, trade, wines, and cheese, was service to others. As we heard earlier, the great quote from his retirement was someone describing him thus: "Bruce is proof that decentness and integrity do not have to be boring." From the generosity of others, which affected his life even as a young boy, he assumed the duty to pay it forward. And he taught me early on the high that you get from giving of one's time, talent, and treasure to benefit others. He led by example, the best and truest form of leadership. And he was a world traveler. Since his youth, he had an enduring urge to travel the world. As I noted before, I did not realize until my teen years that it was rather unusual as an elementary school student to have memories of living in Paris and seeing the Eiffel Tower out my window at bedtime, or fly-covered meat in open-air markets of North Africa, or the summer in junior high when we rented an RV and drove around the USA. No, really, around the USA, like everyone does. Bruce visited over 120 countries during his life, including amazing places like Antarctica and crazy places like Iran. Over the years, I was always half expecting to get a surprise postcard from North Korea, Bruce posing with some locals. His lifelong travel buddy for nearly all of these trips was my mom, Barbara. He loved trains. He described his fascination with watching steam trains pull into his hometown with loads of tourists in the 1940s. Some of my fondest childhood memories are of building and running our HO train set in our basement, or going to a big train yard with him and Lori and watching full-size trains pull in. He's ridden trains in over 50 countries. He took the Orient Express all the way across Europe to the Pacific. With particular fondness for old steam engines, he found them from Zimbabwe to Paraguay to Mongolia. If you've never seen Bruce and Barbara's map pinboard, you should. It's a testament to his love of seeing the world and bringing those perspectives back to inform his life and the mentoring of others. It's honestly hard to grasp that one person could see so many places in one lifetime. In short, his was a life well lived. Always a master of using his time well, he reached his zenith, in my opinion, in his Aspen retirement. His truest calling was as a grandfather. My iconic memory of him in grandpa mode was the morning I was home from R&R from Iraq, and he was there with us at our condo. I returned in the dawn light from the gym. I turned the corner to see my little 3-year-old Anna walking along naked but for pink panties and purple Crocs with a flower in her hand, traipsing along the curb, investigating bugs or whatever caught her fancy.
I was initially concerned about my escapee, but then I saw Grandpa Bruce walking about 10 paces behind, biscotti in hand, a big smile on his face. I have no doubt that he would have spent hours helping her explore, allowing no larger care to intrude, and having no task of more value to him. He was the gold standard of grandfathers. Throughout his life, Bruce never cheated, but he never failed to get maximum value for his money. I love an anecdote from his youth where he talked about how he would earn 10 cents helping his sister work, and then he would go to the penny arcade and get all-day entertainment, putting a penny in the flip movie thing, turning it until it got done, but if you didn't turn it that last clip, you could win it backwards. That was clever. It was classic Bruce. What became apparent as his lived example was every dollar you don't waste on B is available to let you do C. He showed us the power of mindfulness, of being deliberate and patient. I can remember so often travel by car, dining on bologna and pickle roll-ups, leftover chicken, celery sticks, water in mason jars from that beat-up old red cooler. What I never understood until later was that it was avoiding the 50 restaurant meals that got us the money to go on the trip in the first place. We ate fast food so rarely, and Bruce disdained it so thoroughly. He once took me to Roy Rogers for a birthday treat, and there was some confusion. He did not understand the concept of a fixins bar where you take your burger and go get the toppings, and so he came and sat down with his salad bar, and salad bars were a new thing back then. He sat down with the salad bar plate. He said, "This salad bar is crap. That's all vegetables. It really has pennies." The fixins bar. So I had to walk him over to the
the actual salad bar. A few years back, during a visit to Aspen, I saw Bruce walk outside, and he was wearing a 30-year-old t-shirt that I recognized as mine from my 9th grade year. It still fit him. It clearly no longer fits me. In today's consumptive, debt-ridden society, such a story seems almost beyond belief. But why not reuse a perfectly good shirt? He wasn't trying to impress anyone. And why would you spend even $5 to get a shirt at the thrift store if there was one right here? Plus, if you avoid buying 3 $5 shirts, you can buy that $40 bottle of wine when it's on sale. Bruce loved music, and it was such a huge, huge part of his life. He loved being in choral societies and choirs. Between the music and the good food, I think he never would have left Aspen. He loved the Food and Wine Festival, the Aspen Music Festival, his chapel and volunteer families. He loved retirement and his new life and friends in Aspen so much. He loved having visitors. I think had the town promised him free wine and cheese, he would have happily served as mayor of Aspen without pay. He'd have done a pretty darn good job, too. He had a full, joyous, worthy, impactful, and positive life. His example is worthy of remembering and celebrating and emulating by all of us, all of the hundreds and hundreds of students, colleagues, relatives, and friends who cherished having him as part of our lives. As with pretty much everything, Bruce showed us how it was done. But now, his time as our mentor, our teacher, our companion, and our friend has ended. It was perhaps my hardest task, our hardest task, to honor a father's request to let him control his own exit from this world, a world he made so much better. And I don't know about you, but I fully intend to honor Bruce by carrying forward everything that he taught and showed me. For in any of our actions inspired by his memory, he lives on. And I will stand fast at my post, doing as he would have done to help others, to make things better. Because as he breathed his last, I say, the noblest thing that perished there was his old and faithful heart.
Let us sing this hymn that Bruce loved, and certainly, as Barbara said, in keeping with his Lutheran background. This is a hymn by Martin Luther. It's in the red hymnal, hymn number 110. In the red hymnal, there's some other hymnals in the back, people on the side here. And let us sing joyously with our choir, hymn number 110 of Mighty Fortress is Our God, verses 1 and 4, the first verse and the last verse. Let us stand and sing.
Amen.
if it is possible, that something of me will go on in humanity, that the good I have done does not have to be perfect to be effective, and that perhaps it will multiply in the lives of others, helping somehow in the amazing human endeavor. Tell me, if you like, that I go into the arms of God. You will be making poetry as I have done in other words and ways. Then let me go to nature as I came from nature, to the great cycles of creativity that I have dimly understood. When you commit my ashes to the ground or to the stream, commit them. For then one cycle of individual life will be over, and unit of nature will be separated into its minute parts for participation in new ways, as atoms rearrange in the mysterious slow seething of the universe. I have come from infinity, and I go to infinity, between which events, for a little time, I came to celebrate that miracle which I could never fully fathom. Therefore, when it is time, yield me dying, yield me dead in this tradition, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, in sure and certain hope that the dust which bloomed briefly in my loving will bloom again.
hears will remember him, and that spirit again will go on here and beyond. The benediction is one that Barbara had picked out, and was very nice. It was very simple benediction. We weren't too sure where it is, and it only took Lori to point it out to me. It takes someone from MIT to figure this out. And she said, well, you know, it just looks like the traditional benediction that has just been sung here. And this is probably just a contemporary rendition of the benediction, the Aaronic benediction by Aaron, found in the book of Numbers that they had just sung. And here is this contemporary version of it. And I might say that we will be going right out to the garden from here, and I'll have the family go out first. But you can also feel free to listen to this postlude as well, picked out by the family, and again, I'm sure was a favorite postlude of Bruce's as well. Let us stand for this benediction. May the light of God surround you, Bruce. May the love of God enfold you, Bruce. May the presence of God watch over you and give you peace. Amen. Go in peace as Bruce has gone in peace.